Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Meenakshi Iyer. I'm your host and the founder and principal of Northstar Solutions and Services, which is a boutique future of work oriented coaching, training, and consulting practice. I'm physically located here in Virginia on the east coast of the US. And I'd love to hear from you where you're joining us. If you are live with us right now, we are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Pop in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from and what is it that you're looking forward to hearing today. So this is episode 20 of Exploring Intersections, which is a conversation space that I created, I want to say a little over a year ago. And it's really dedicated to unpacking intersections as we co-create a future work that works for everyone. And that's something that I am extremely passionate about, and most of the work that I do is in this space. And I particularly love intersections because I think that they offer this unique vantage point to understand different perspectives and form informed opinions about things around us. So we meet here every other Wednesday, 8 a.m. New York time. And I have the privilege of speaking to guests from around the world as we unpack a different intersection in each conversation. So, last time when we met, we unpacked the intersection of leadership and coaching. And today we are looking at the intersection of physical and mental well being. In the U.S., May was Mental Health Awareness Month. There's a lot of conversation around this, and the last 3 years or so, if nothing, one thing it has taught us is the importance of mental well-being. And when we often talk about this intersection, physical and mental well-being, somehow physical well-being has been taken for granted much longer than mental well-being. But I'm not sure if that's entirely true. So there's a lot that happens at this intersection, also in the context of leadership. And so, to help us unpack all that today, we have with us our special guest, Angelina Beas. Here we go. Welcome, Angelina.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here today, bright and early. And I know it's 8 a.m. for you as well, where you are.
All good. I'm up early. I'm an early bird.
Thank you so much. And I do want to share with everyone how the two of us connected. And then I'd love to invite Angelina to share a little bit more about her professional journey and what got her to where she is right now. Angelina and I met earlier this year through another dear friend, Tiffany Castano. And Angelina was one of our fantastic workshop presenters at the International Women's Day Conference, the Future of Work Conference that was held in March. And Angelina is based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, here in the US. And she is an organizational development and change management consultant and a leadership and well-being coach. And Angelina is also an ICF certified coach. And I know that, Angelina, you've had a very interesting journey into what you do today as a leadership and well-being coach, where you work with executives in helping them sort of get to this, figure out this balance between physical and mental well-being.
Yeah.
And so when I started thinking about this intersection, you were the first person that popped into my head, and I'm so glad that we are able to have this conversation.
Me too. Me too. I'm delighted to be here. And I'm excited, looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So I would invite you to share a little bit more about your professional journey and what got you into this space.
Yeah. It's interesting. My journey, I think, started back when I was in college. I'm an undergrad in exercise science with a concentration in wellness. And a lot of our focus was on physical health. As you can imagine, the body, kinesiology, all of those things. And I took this elective class, which was on holistic health. And it really got me connected to mind body connection, right? So I was a athlete all my life. I was very in my body. I knew that there was a mental component to what I was doing. I mean, it was the first time I had really dove deep into oh my gosh, there's these different energy bodies that we all have. And it goes back into ancient times. We've just really lost touch with it in our current society. Um, During that time, I was taking a class that really stressed me out, and it elicited this stress response in my body that was literally generated from an overactive mind. I was basically like projecting worst case scenario into the situation, and it elicited this, like my whole body broke out into hives. I brought on a bout of insomnia. I never had sleeping issues. And it was just so happened at that time, I was overtraining for a marathon and got injured. And I was like, stepped into my first yoga class and was like, oh my gosh, what is this? What is happening here? And that was really my entry point into the mind body connection, which then really got me curious into performance, right? So whether you're an athlete, whether you're a leader, if you're a parent, whatever it is, right, where you're investing your precious energy into something that you care about, the health, our overall health really matters, and how we approach things. And so I then got into corporate wellness. I then took on formal leadership roles. And it was during that time that I truly was like surrounded by so many amazing people that were advancing in their careers and starting to see that, oh my goodness, like as people started to advance, they stopped doing certain things that actually got them to the place that allowed them to advance in their career. For instance, hobbies, things that stimulate you beyond just what you do for your profession or for a living, right? They tend to sit in meetings longer. They skip lunch, so now we're getting into, I'm not even meeting Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs, but yet I'm being asked to operate at the top of the triangle, which is self-actualization and expression, but I'm not meeting basic needs that are lower in that hierarchy. And so it's interesting that we forget how important it is to maintain a balance, which the definition of balance evolves as you move through life, right?
Yeah.
So fast forward, I've gone through bouts of intense burnout, which is part of why I attended your awesome. And I highly recommend anybody listening, you must attend next year, bookmark it, save the date. It was hands down one of the most engaging, energizing virtual experiences I have ever attended. But to say that we are energy beings navigating this world, right? And it's really important that we not only take care of ourselves physically, but emotionally and mentally. And I'm also big on the spiritual component. And if that resonates with you, go for it. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. But I would say that's, a big part of what's gotten me passionate about whole health, mental, emotional, physical well-being. And leaders, we're being asked to perform at such high levels, make decisions, think critically, consume mass amounts of information, make decisions in very short periods of time. And a lot of us are living on fumes and caffeine. And that's just not good enough. We deserve better. So yeah, I'm really passionate about us taking care of ourselves as we pursue success, not at the expense of success.
I love that, especially what you said at the end, right there. Not at the, taking care of ourselves regardless of what's happening, and not putting that aside and pursuing success, not at the cost of our own well-being. Yeah, such important call outs, and particularly in today's times, in a post-pandemic era. I also wanted to go back. The call out that you made, right? The mind-body connection, the intersection of physical and mental well-being. This is something that's really ancient, and I'm so glad you called that out, because I think all ancient cultures speak to that, and there is so much of wisdom in ancient cultures around the world that understand that. And our ways of living were really designed around that, and we have sort of stepped away and forgotten so much about it in the past several hundred years.
Yeah, it's interesting. We want so much convenience, and I'll tell you what, I don't know about you, but a lot of people through the pandemic that I connected with that were like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I've taken a step back and I realized I need to take better care of myself.
Yep.
Right. Or, oh, now that I don't have that hour and a half commute, I can actually fit physical fitness in. I have a morning meditation practice because I'm not rushing off to go here and to go there. And so people have reconnected and gotten back to some of those. I think it's essential, right? You wouldn't think about not eating. You wouldn't think about not drinking water. Most of us wouldn't think about leaving the house without brushing our teeth, right? But yet we don't floss our minds. We don't. And that's what I think of mindfulness and meditation practices is we've got a lot of stuff. We have never consumed this much information in the history of humanity. And I don't think people know how to handle that, right? It creates such a physical strain and a mental strain. And yet there's all these resiliency programs that are designed to benefit the company, not the employee. And it's a problem, right? And so it doesn't, I would say, find what works for you. But most people I know took that step back. And I would say going back to like the ancient concepts, right? It was our lives centered around the changing of the seasons. It was acceptable. Like it was expected that you would slow down in the winter months, not. And, we have this expectations with humans that we can just constantly be in what I consider to be a spring and summer season of constantly blooming, constantly producing, constantly generating. And if you follow cycles and seasons, you need to have incubation times. You need to have time for creativity. You need to have time to step back and let there just be space for nothing, right? And so now I think that science, thank goodness, is starting to show us the value of non-doing. Simply being. And that is so essential for leaders because I think we're so much to so many people around us that we need to actually be with ourselves first and take care of ourselves, not last. And I think one of the things that really came up in the International Women's Day conference that you hosted, and being a woman, is we are expected to just do more constantly, and take on more and it be okay. And so I think a lot of people feel that strain. We talk about it, and the leaders that I coach are like, something's wrong with me. And I'm like, no, you're human. You're not a machine. What you're feeling is burning it at both ends. Your body is telling you something. You live in your head. You're cut off from the neck down. There's all these signs that our bodies are constantly giving us that we have been educated to learn to ignore. And then it manifests in the form of dis-ease or disease. And if you look at most diseases, they're lifestyle related and preventable. The good majority of them are preventable. And yet we're surprised that this happens after decades of abusing our bodies, right? And it's an unfortunate reality. So I do think that I'm excited about the highlighting of the connection of physical, mental, emotional well-being, removing the stigma that is around mental health that I think really shuts a lot of conversations off. Or we just push people to EAP, or go see a therapist. And it's like, well, yes, all of those are great resources and thank goodness we have them. But not everybody needs that. Sometimes you're needing something else before you get to those other situations.
Absolutely.
I hope I answered your question. I meander.
No. This is totally fine. And first of all, thank you for calling out your experience at the conference. I think it was one of the best ones we've done. Tiffany and I have been co-hosting it for the last 3 years, and it was such a timely conversation on burnout. And your session on breathwork was absolutely fantastic. And I know that the attendees, gained a lot from it and walked away with a lot. And I want to also touch upon some of your other work that you do in the community towards as we go along in the conversation. Um, and the call out you made about each of us being so many to so many others, as women, as leaders, whatever roles we take on in our lives, and the also remembering to learn from nature. I love what you said. In nature, nothing blooms forever, and we somehow have made it unacceptable for us as humans to do that. And I always think, and this is something I've learned in my own journey, especially in the last 2-3 years, is that rest is not a reward; it is an activity, and we need to make time for it.
It's essential.
Right? Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think that this is where this the society we live in, where action is always rewarded and it's always go go go, that taking time to step back or not do anything is looked down upon, and there's stigma attached to that as well, right?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, especially with the work that you do with leaders, and for me, leaders don't necessarily mean that you have a team that reports to you. To me, everybody has the potential to be a leader, and everybody is a leader. And I think that, particularly in remote hybrid work type of situation, a lot of us have even more opportunities to show up as a leader because of our changed ways of working. And we have to hold ourselves accountable for the outcomes that we are creating and things like that, given remote working conditions, for example. So against that context of leadership, um, what do you see as like the top two challenges, if you will, for folks to experience this intersection or be at this intersection?
Yeah. So no, I'm going to call out a couple of things. I 100% agree with you that leadership is not a title. It is a way of being. I saw a quote recently that said, if you're inspiring somebody to be better or inspiring greatness in another person, then you're a leader. And
Absolutely.
I was like, I love that. So the question is, what do we see as the biggest, like the top two challenges for leaders?
To keep this balance between physical and mental well-being.
First and foremost, people will say time and time again, time, right? What I see is it comes down to permission and priorities. Most people yearn to have breaks in their day. And as a matter of fact, I lead a mental fitness coaching cohort. And that is one of the things that we actively work on in the group is weaving in 2-minute, like a 2-minute break. I'm not kidding you. A 2-minute break to stop and sit and just tune into feeling, breathing. There's different practices that we go through. 2 minutes. You would not, it's so hard for people to be like, I deserve that 2 minutes in the middle of my day. Like that also means they're not taking a lunch break or a break in your day, whether it's to eat lunch, go for a walk, run an errand, whatever it might be, right? They're struggling with 2 minutes in the middle of their day to just collect themselves and say, how do I feel right now in this moment? So those things, once we can get to the place of like permission, I give myself permission. I own my calendar. I'm responsible for my time. I need to take care of me. No one else is going to do it for me but me. Once we can make that mindset shift, then it's like, oh yeah, now I can see all around me, everything where there's these opportunities, right, to take a break. And I think that those micro moments are so essential because you talk about like people are like, oh, I don't have 60 minutes or I don't have this. But I'm like, when I hear people say I don't even have 2 minutes in my day between meetings to give myself just an opportunity to breathe, to feel my feet, to feel my seat, or maybe even just to look out the window and appreciate like the tree that's right outside that's blooming, right? Those things, and it's like, why does that happen? So when I coach clients and I ask them, who said you can't do that? No one has said it. As a culture, no one's demonstrating that in the workplace for them to look to as role models.
Yeah, yeah.
And if they do see it, it's, I could never be that way. And there's a whole host of reasons why they're allowed to do that and not me. So I think that there's this big mindset shift that is happening. And I'm really excited to be part of encouraging that movement of, you know, I'm a human being. I'm not a machine that runs, right? Like the human body wasn't designed to work the way that we live right now. It wasn't meant to sustain focus for hours and hours and hours and hours. And yet we feel like we're going to be different. We can change that. And it's like, no, actually, the point of diminished returns, you could work less. You could have better outcomes and a higher quality of life if you actually took breaks in the middle of your day. Your brain, like science has shown that your body needs that to be able to operate at an optimal level. So it's something so simple, but I think we often overlook it. And when I talk about priorities, I come back to living in alignment with your values. I'm very values-based. The work that I do in my coaching practice is all around aligning ourselves with our personal values. And I think that tension that a lot of people feel is a result of not living in alignment with what's most important to you. And the consequence of that is stress, anxiety, and that manifests in lots of places. And I've seen the magic of taking time to recalibrate, you really get into alignment and watching what's possible there. I mean, talk about, you don't have to generate fake energy. It's so self-sustaining and intrinsic that it's just there. It just happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And, I love what you said. It's not about having time. It's about permissions and priorities and using our own agency around that. And a lot of times we forget the amount of power each of us has, right? And our systems and our commonly accepted social practices have brought us to that point where we forget who we are as an individual. I'm seeing a couple of very interesting comments, so I'm going to bring those in. So Ashwin Satyanarayana says it's got so bad that rest is almost a sin. Not doing anything is indeed looked down upon. It's sad but true, Ashwin, and thank you for sharing your view. This reminds me of, and I often quote this TED Talk by Lisa Bodell. She's the CEO of a think tank called Future Think. And in one of her TED Talks, she talks about, how often have you walked into someone's office and seen someone just sitting and looking out the window, and you ask them, "Hey, Steve, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm thinking." I mean, how often have you seen that happen, right? And
no, it's like now have the answer, and not knowing is not okay. People feel stressed. Yes, we absolutely need process time. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
To that point about that statement is I used to be one of those people. I used to be one of those people that was like, oh, I can't rest, right? And so that's when the burnout came in, and like my body was like, okay, you're not going to rest. I'm going to force you to rest.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard lesson to learn. Don't do it. Please. Hey, stop before you get there. Learn from my suffering. I mean, it is suffering.
Yeah. So Ashwin says he's working solo all by myself. Nobody's even asking me about looking out the window. Good for you. Then you got to do more of it.
Yes.
So that's the other thing, right? Giving permission. It's mostly us giving ourselves permission. And I think I want to even take a step back, and also the point you made about living in alignment with our values. And that takes time to really zero in on what are our values, what is non-negotiable for us, and that requires a whole exercise in self-awareness. And a lot of times we don't take the time to do that as well.
Yeah. The reflection process. I mean, so I think it asks us to know how to reflect a little bit more. But I
Right.
would say pay attention to energy.
Yes.
For me, that's really, it's like, okay, what are the things in my day that give me energy? What are the things in my day that drain my energy?
Mm.
Why is that? What was happening? Who was I with? What was I doing? Who was I being? Right. And I think that with so much, we are so externalized in our world. Social media, and I'm not demonizing social media. Everything has its pros and its cons. We look outside of ourselves for validation that we've lost. And you said it, we give our power away. And part of being able to give yourself permission, part of being able to step into that space is reclaiming your power, reclaiming your energy, and saying, hey, listen, no one's going to do it for me. I actually need, it's a gift I give myself. And when I am able to be in that space, I am the best version of me. I'm going to do my best work. And I'm going to enjoy it in the process. I can't tell you how sad it makes me. I coach senior leaders, and they're like, on paper, I look like the most successful person, and I don't feel successful. And my heart literally aches, right?
Mm.
Why don't I feel successful? Like, I'm not enjoying this title, this position, and yet I worked so hard to get here, and I want to enjoy it, right? So, like for me, a big part of self leadership
Mm.
is getting in alignment with those values, understanding where you're going to do your best work, where you thrive, and then going after that, right? Allowing yourself to explore, and don't worry about being somewhere at some point in your life and looking around at where everybody else is. Like, where do you need to be? What's going to be best for you? And that might not be what your peer group is doing at the moment, right? So, and that's okay.
It's everything you shared. It reminded me. I was having this conversation with Sally Clark last week at the North Star Cafe, and we were talking about the concept of human leadership. And in fact, I shared with her that somehow I didn't plan this, but these three conversations are all tied to each other. The one with Sarita around leadership and coaching, and then the one with Sally, and then the next one with you. And we're all focused around leadership and well-being in a way. And one of the things she said in that was, you are human first, leader second.
Yes.
And and then that really it came back to me as I was hearing you talk about this.
There's a quote that I've heard. So I'm a big yogi, mind body, and it has been said time and time again in workshops that I've gone to is you are a human being, not a human doing.
Doing. Yep.
And yet, like, you think about the energy of being and doing is so different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's where flow happens, creativity. And you look at Harvard Business Review articles, everything out there now where it's like, to really succeed in the world that we're in, to be agile, to meet the demands, to navigate change, we need to kind of allow ourselves time to process and to think and to connect with our curiosity and our creativity. Well, guess what? When you're stressed, you are activating the part of your nervous system that blocks you from accessing any of that. And one of the easiest ways for you to turn on the other part of your nervous system, the parasympathetic side of your nervous system, is rest. This is why I take breath work. It's why I'm into taking a break, going for a walk. It's why I'm into sitting down, closing your eyes and not consuming any information, letting yourself just kind of marinate in where you are at the moment. Is we inhabit this amazing human body, and we go back to the ancient wisdom. We have lost connection with simple practices that we can flip switches consciously, but we're living a very unconscious existence, and we've lost touch with that because we celebrate living in your head and rationalizing and thinking, and all of that serves a purpose and has a place.
Mm.
If overused, this is why people will say, I can't shut my brain off at night. I can't sleep. I can't stop thinking, right? They don't they don't know how to turn the switch off now that they've turned it on. And there are consequences to living that way. But, if you want to get greater access to the whole human experience, you need to be able to balance active and rest. And by the way, rest doesn't necessarily mean not doing anything.
Mm.
But it doesn't mean checking out on social media or checking out and vegging on TV. Like for me, it's going for a walk and just paying attention, seeing something new, watching nature, right? So rest can be active in a sense, but I'm giving my brain and I'm tuning into other senses around me, which feels very rejuvenating. And that's why I come back to the energy. Pay attention to energy.
Yep.
What feels restful for you? Maybe it's connecting. Maybe it's like real, true, authentic connection with somebody for 5 minutes. That's great. Weave that in. Pay attention to incorporating more of that into your day to day.
Yeah. You shared so many practical tips right there, Angelina. And the interesting thing is that these are also accessible to almost all of us. I wouldn't say all of us because I know there are certain jobs that are different, their experience is different.
Yeah.
But to most of us, everything that you've shared is so accessible. Taking time to be in nature, and doesn't have to be big chunks of time. It can be a 2-minute break, a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
But giving ourselves the permission to do that, that's such an impactful call out. I am seeing a couple more comments. I'm going to bring those in. So I have a comment here from Christina. This was when we were talking about how we are constantly in the go, go, go. And Christina shares, it's mostly because we have to be available 24 hours a day and work commitments never stop. It's never ending. And I know you've touched upon this when you talked about how we prioritize and what permissions we give ourselves. Yeah. But I do want to ask you, in your experience with the work that you do, there are some folks, like let's say, who work in like frontline responders, emergency services, and things like that, right? It's so difficult. So how does this input transfer over to other jobs that are inherently stressful?
Yeah. And, so that's a really great point. And I think that it comes down to environment that we're in, right? So we have to resource ourselves. And what I've learned is that everybody's hardwiring is different. My stress response, my threshold for stress is going to be different than other people's. And so I would be doing a disservice to somebody else to say, I don't understand what you're so stressed about right now in this situation. Having some compassion and some empathy for my experience is my experience. And yes, I could look at the world and only see it that way, but that's not the way the world is, right? And I'm wondering as well, your example of like first responders is how can we actually start to create space in jobs because this is where I come down to is if I work in a company or if I work in a company culture and it is a certain way and it doesn't support what I need, do I need to then change to meet the needs of the culture? Can I change to meet the needs of the culture? Or do I need to change my setting? Do I just need to say, this is actually not healthy for me? And I've done that. I've actually left very toxic work environments because I tried to adapt to the culture and I'm not saying that high stress situations are all toxic. That's an extreme example, right? But what I think coming back is to say, what's going to be the right space for me, my nervous system, how I need to operate. And what I've found is that most of us aren't physically and mentally and emotionally cared for in a capacity that I think would even allow us to meet certain situations in a more balanced state. So how can we start to do that? Well, I go back to something so simple, which is establish a regular sleep schedule, our circadian rhythms. Most people do not get enough sleep. I go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We don't hydrate. Where most of us, we are primarily made up of water, yet most people don't drink enough water. And when we do drink something, we drink something that's caffeinated, which dehydrates us, and we're already in a dehydrated state, which if you look at people that are dehydrated, they're not operating at an optimal level. When we are in heightened states of stress, how we breathe affects our mental state, right? And this is why breath work is really important. Learning to know the signs and signals of, oh my God, I'm starting to move into an elevated state of stress. I need to self-regulate, right? And so you can teach your body how to self-regulate in situations so that you don't go from like a 0 to a 10. Maybe you can start to recognize symptoms at a 4 and cap it at a 4 before you go to a 10. And that's where I think learning to really tune into the wisdom of the body is so important. And that happens when we slow down. We can't connect to those parts of ourselves when we're moving fast. We can go fast and access that through practice, but a weekend workshop isn't going to give you that, right? That's something that we really need to cultivate. And it's just like any new habit that you're looking to establish, it feels really clunky because you haven't built the neural pathways where it's super accessible to you in those moments. So, there are groups that, if I'm a first responder and I'm in a group and I'm interested in learning how to self-regulate, talk with your peers. I'm sure that's a shared pain that a lot of folks are feeling. How could we as a group support one another? People are 500 times more likely to actually be successful in establishing a new habit when they do it with other people. And finding the things that work best for you, understanding what your stress trigger responses are, understanding how does that start to manifest in the physical sensations that I'm feeling in my body? And that takes time for us to step back and reflect. But I do think that there are some very simple things we can be doing. Like, you ever watch an animal after a stress response? They literally shake their entire body and and it's a mechanism for them to clear their system of that stress response. Well, we need to create that for ourselves. Taylor Swift says, shake it off. I will tell you, there are lots of ways that people can do that. And it's not one size fits all. Like, you have to sample. And that's what I also love to teach my clients in my mental fitness program is we sample so many different techniques. And ultimately what they find is, I really like this. It's so accessible. It drops me in the moment. It allows me to let go. And what we're looking at is not reducing the fact that I have a stress response. We reduce the cycle time. We want to reduce the amount of time that stress hormones are circulating through your body and doing damage. We want to reduce the amount of time that your mind spends ruminating about that particular situation to bring you back, right? So it's not that, oh, this thing happens. It's, oh, I used to sit with that for a week. Now it's 4 days. Then it's 3 days. Now it's 2 hours. Now it's 30 minutes, right? That's what we're looking for. Things are going to be stressful around us, but can I actually reduce the amount of cycle time that I spend in that mental, emotional hijack situation?
That's so valuable what you called out. The fact that we're not talking about eliminating those hard emotions or feelings,
yes,
or running away from them, but we're talking about training our bodies and our minds,
yes,
to get better at it, get better at navigating them.
I've been a weight trainer I've lifted weights since I was in high school, right? Progressive overload is a real thing. That is when the muscle can only meet a certain threshold of resistance and then it exhausts itself. So you train with heavier weights, lifting to kind of get you to build your strength. Well, life, it has no shortage of stressful opportunities, right?
Yes,
So one
yes.
of the things that we talk about it with one of the things that I work in teaching people is the world is your playground, is your gym, is an opportunity to build up your ability to be with. And often what we're doing is changing our relationship to seeing something as bad to seeing it as, okay, well, this is a stressful situation. How can I use this? What can I learn from it? How can I grow? And sometimes part of growing is I need to remove myself. I need to step back. I'm not capable of responding right now. I'm too reactionary, right? That's okay. You don't have to in every single moment have the answers or respond or whatever. And I will tell you, if you compare like the mind and the body, physical conditioning, right? I think that there's a lot more just focus on physical health and conditioning and how to make yourself stronger and how to do all of that. I think we're really, and at the mass level, starting to look at how do we do that on a mental level?
Yes.
Because it's true, it is possible, right? And I would say that that's something that we have to really take our time with and be patient with and practice imperfection. We want things like yesterday and a week of going into the Calm app and doing a breathing exercise isn't going to change decades of hardwired responding that you are unconsciously practicing right now. Like you're not even aware that you have to make something conscious and bring it into your level of awareness to then say, oh, that's interesting. What pieces do I want to change about this? And then apply that change and work through the fumbling of habit. If you've ever, worked with habit, you know how challenging and how hard that can be. And it's not impossible. It's something that we can absolutely work with. It's just, we have to be very intentional about what it is that we're practicing and why it's important to us.
It reminds me, everything that you shared just now reminds me of being in a science lab while at school and, monitoring everything for results. And then, you're tweaking, you learn from it.
Yes. Yes.
And so thank you so much for that analogy and sharing that. There's another comment, so I'm going to bring that in. So Subramaniam says, we get caught in the corporate whirlpool that we forget about self-care. And this is something that you've been talking about. Using the air safety analogy, you need to put on your mask first before helping others, but seems so tough to practice in the corporate space. I could not agree more. What are your thoughts on that, Angelina? I know you've alluded to some practices when you talked about permissions and priorities. Anything else you would like to add?
So this is, I think when I come back to my own experience of what used to stress me out about corporate and not even maybe we're saying corporate, but I would say environments that maybe don't appreciate support. I would come back and say, challenge your own assumptions first. I can't tell you the number of people that are living according to a rule, which is I can't do that. And then when I dig into that and I ask them who said you couldn't do that, or no one. And I'm like, okay, well, let's experiment with this. I want you to just step away for 15 minutes, like really step away. Don't worry about the pinging and the Teams or the chat or whatever it might be. Experiment in small increments in your environment and test some of your own assumptions about that, because I fell into that. And there were some things that I totally was like sold on for no reason whatsoever. And then there were times when there truly were toxic environments. Like I was on a team, we were working Sev ones. I was getting calls at 12:30 at night, 1 o'clock in the morning. I went to my manager and I said, I appreciate that this is part of what this job entails. I don't have access to critical thinking at that time. I'm really concerned that this might not be the right job for me. And I had to have some really critical, honest conversations with myself and then have that with my leadership team. And what I learned was, it's like, oh, we just wanted you to be informed. We're not necessarily needing you to do A, B, and C. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought I needed to do A, B, and C. I didn't have role clarity, which is interesting because I talk with a lot of people that don't have that as well. You know, you look at job descriptions. One of the things that's in the job description is end duties as identified, able to work in an ambiguous environment. Well, I'm responsible for clarifying some of that ambiguity for myself. And then I need to make some decisions based on some of the answers that I'm getting based off of that. If I can't have a conversation with my leader, that's a bigger issue. That is, people don't leave companies, they leave leaders, right? And so who you surround yourself with, who you're working with matters. I need to be able, it's that level of transparency, that level of honesty and candor. I need that. I interview very seriously around that when I'm thinking about taking on any job. And if I can't have that, it's not I'm never going to do my best work there. Like, I'm just going to keep pushing a boulder up a hill. I think the other thing too is to acknowledge performance happens in a very magical place. And there is a point of diminished returns. And I want to say that I have to go back and look at this, but I want to say that like a lot of the workforce research and analytics is showing that anything over 7.5 hours of like really dedicated work, you're not doing better work. You're actually just spinning your wheels. You'd be better off stepping back. And, you know, so for me, there's evidence out there, there's data out there to build a business case, to build a reason and a rationale for why you might be advocating for a different way of working in your workplace. And I would say lean on that, you know, and start there. But, you know, self-care is not something that we just do in the workplace. And I want to say that 8-10 hours, however long you're working, 12 hours, there's still the rest of your day. And I would implore you to take care of yourself there as well, because we're looking to do that in a work environment. And the work environment has a huge impact on the other hours that we're spending outside of work. No doubt. No doubt at all. It is all interconnected. There is no work-life balance. There is just life.
Yes.
Right? It is life. And if you're not taking care of yourself outside of work, and then you're coming into work and you're being exposed to high stress, look at what your span of control actually is and where you can be taking better care of yourself, and be really honest. You know, that looking in the mirror can be really hard. I do that work. I've done that work. It makes me squirm. And it's some of the best work that you could be doing in your life, because it's actually helping you to get down at such a root level where you can impact true change, I believe. So yeah, it's, I don't know. I don't know if that's too broad brush, or if that addresses some of those things, but you know, I'm speaking from my personal experience. I'm one person, you know?
Yeah, no. And that is also valuable. And as you were sharing, Angelina, what came up for me is really examining how much of what we do and who we are and who we are trying to be, how much of that is for ourselves and how much of that is meant for the external world. And I think that when I did that examination and that reflection, I was able to identify there were the parts that I was doing that was meant for the external world, and I really wasn't gaining much from it for myself. And I realized that, and I totally understand what you said. You know, I squirm every time I do that, as you said. And it was a very difficult exercise, and because you have to be honest with yourself, and then to say, okay, these are the 5 things that I'm doing just to keep up appearances, or I'm putting on a show for the rest of the world, be it work or be it social circles or whatever. How okay am I to stop doing them and really doing that sort of inventory,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Well, so you're touching on something that I think is really important. If you're part of a system, whether you realize it or not, you're contributing to the system. And personal accountability is huge. The part that makes me squirm is I'm like, oh, well, that was me finger pointing out. Really, that's me. I allow this. I allow calls outside of work hours. I allow text messaging at the dinner table with my boss, right? And when I stepped out of that and looked at that, I was so disappointed with myself because I violated my own personal boundaries and what I said I would never do. And I did. So I had to kind of mourn that experience within myself and then move on and say, okay, lesson learned. Like, what am I taking away from this right now?
Yes. Yes.
But there is a level of accountability, and I had to really kind of hone in on what parts am I responsible for? What can I control? I can't control other people. I can't control what they think and do. I can control how I respond to it. I can control where I give my energy and how much of it I give, right? Because the people in my life that I love and that I care about don't deserve the scraps. Right? It was really important that I'm like, I need to safeguard a certain amount of energy so that I can give that and that came to realigning with my values.
Yep.
Just coming full circle. That is my compass. That is my North Star. That to me is my litmus test for how I make decisions. And it really simplified for me. Oh, that's interesting. That looks really good, but it's not going to fit. I know it's just not going to be good for me.
Yeah. That was so profound, Angelina. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. And I didn't even realize what time it is. And this was such a wonderful conversation.
We can talk for hours, I feel.
Yeah. And Ashwin, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone who joined us live, for all your questions and comments. And it really made for such a lively, enriching conversation. We'd love to hear from you, what you are taking away from this. So keep the comments coming in on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And if you're just now joining us, well, we are beginning to wrap up our conversation here at Exploring Intersections. We've been talking to Angelina Beas, and we have been digging into the intersection of physical and mental well-being. And we touched upon a few things, and I just wanted to bring back some of the tips that Angelina shared. The first thing that really spoke to me and what you said was it's about permission and priorities. And then you shared a few simple steps that is accessible to almost all of us. And it's around establishing a regular sleep schedule, staying hydrated, learning to self-regulate, and then tuning into the wisdom of our own body, and then just slowing down. And the slowing down doesn't have to be for minutes and hours. It can be even just a few seconds, but then just being mindful of that, and then challenging our own assumptions around some ways of working and workplace behaviors that we've sort of followed unquestioningly so far. This has been absolutely wonderful, Angelina. I want to spend the last few minutes asking you to share with us what you do in the community. How can people reach out to you? I know that there is this Wednesday sessions that you do around breathwork.
I pressed pause on that just for the summer. So I compete in bodybuilding, so my schedule is actually very full right now with that. So I have pressed pause in that space. But what I do is I like to help people fully inhabit their bodies and be able to come home and understand what you're feeling, what's going on in this internal space. And a couple ways that I do that is I teach yoga. I teach more of a Ashtanga Hatha, which is not power yoga, but it is more of like the 8 limbs, very traditional, slower breath work. I'm very big on relaxation. I think all of that, learning how to do that is really important. I'm currently running mental fitness cohorts, group coaching programs. I'm wrapping up my current one, and then I'm going to be starting a new one. It's a 6-week session that really looks at rewiring the reactionary parts of our brain and turning on the thriving centers of our brain. So it's literally working with this magnificent human body that we all inhabit. And so I'll be opening up registration for that. I do one-on-one coaching with individuals. I work with people that are in formal leadership roles, but I also work with people that aren't in leadership roles and just want to learn how to self-lead. And what I mean by that is living in alignment with your values and learning how to really recalibrate so that you're kind of living life from the inside out. Is work that I do. And then I'm also an organizational development and change management consultant, and I help organizations to keep the human at the center of change, and also helping people to realize that even in chaos, even in the unknown, there are certain patterns and themes that we can be following to gain control, because ultimately that's what people are looking for when change is happening. Is I feel ungrounded. I want to regain some control. I love doing sessions like this. I love podcasts. And I also do group and corporate public speaking. So if there's an opportunity for us to connect, I would love to connect with you. Find me on social, reach out. I'd love to hear how I could help you, or even just how we could collaborate and form a partnership. So yeah.
That was wonderful, Angelina. Thank you. Thank you so much. And there's comments here in the chat as well. Thank you, Ashwin, Christina, and Subramaniam. And I know there's a few more joining us live. We don't always get to see everyone here. And if you missed joining us live, you can catch the recording right here on LinkedIn or on Facebook and YouTube, any of the 3 social media channels for North Star Solutions and Services. This has been absolutely wonderful, Angelina. I'm so glad our paths have crossed. I'm so glad we were able to do this conversation.
Me too.
Yeah.
You're doing great work here, by the way, putting this out here and holding space. And the fact that I'm hearing that there's so many synergies between the different speakers, I think you're definitely onto something.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think the best work happens, very serendipitously. And so this has been absolutely wonderful. And so if you please reach out to Angelina for more, and we'll meet you right back here in 2 weeks from today on July 5th. And we are talking about the intersection of gender, power, and research. And we'll be talking to Rucha Kapre. Yes, and I'm really looking forward to that conversation. And so I'd love for you all to join us back here. And next Wednesday at 11 a.m. New York time, I'll be at the North Star Cafe talking to Shilpa Adwani about community building as a leadership skill. So looking forward to having you all then there. And that's it from us here right now. Once again, Angelina, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom.
Yourselves out there.
Thank you, everyone. Take care and be well.
Be well.